to read them for some reason. So though I get a message, even if I set it within code here, like even if I set SQL username as user and I try to retrieve it, apparently I'm unable to. I'll probably need to figure out if it's something related to my PC alone, but this is generally how we work around it for reference. Oh, and one thing I can try is deactivate this and try. No, still did not work. So yeah, this is one problem that I'm facing. So I don't think I'll be able to solve this immediately. So please note that. But in production, in real world, this is essentially what we do to make sure that every password, every username that is available, that is stored separately and then used. Just so you're aware of this, the second half of the last day's session is going to be more on advanced things in Python. Let's think about this. So far, what we have learned, what we have looked at, is all the things that we can do with Python from scratch. We have learned things like data structures, how we work around them. We have learned things, a lot of different object-oriented programming concepts. We have learned a lot of different built-in Python modules that you use on a regular basis and all of these. Up next, what I'm going to focus on is more like a smell the roses kind of session where we're going to take our next 3-4 hours and particularly look at some specific modules in Python that help you perform very specific and advanced tasks. And knowing these is going to give you an edge over most other developers in Python in real world. There are Python packages that help you create machine learning models that help you perform web automation. That is, you can log in, you can book flight tickets, whatever you want with an automated way. There are tons of things that you can do on top of Python. You can test your code if you make some changes in your code and you want to know whether it works well or not. You can test it. There are hundreds of things that we can literally do in Python, and I'm just going to walk us through them so that we get to know how they are. We get to see some new packages in Python. We get to introduce ourselves to some advanced concepts in Python that can help us be better developers to begin with. So that is basically going to be the plan. So let's go ahead and begin on that end. Apologies for that. And the focus on SQL is going to be less compared to most other things because I'll just point this out. SQL connections are simple. And if you know SQL, your execution of queries are going to be very, very easy to do. So this hopefully should not take too much time. So we can go and learn a lot more pretty new packages to begin with. So let's start with this. So I'm just going to uncomment this and begin. Right. Please hold on for a few seconds. Right. Now, back to our point. When we start to work on SQL, when we start to work on, let's say, a SQL database to begin with, you need to know which host you're. It could be something like HTTP://. There could be some particular IP, some particular IP slash some port, for instance. So this is something you might connect to. Most often, generally, we put up SQL in 3306 port. That's the default port which SQL listens to. In my case, I'm not connecting to any other host. I'm just connecting to localhost in my case. Localhost is my own system because I've got SQL installed, MySQL Community Server Edition installed in my own PC. So when I connect with localhost, it connects to my own PC. And I'll just specify the username and password. That's pretty much it. And once we're done with connection, we'll just try to Okay, yeah, it is with. All right. So always remember, whenever we start with which is a context manager, we start a connection and it will automatically close the connection the moment we are out of this with block. Let's remember that. So we have started a connection, and yeah, once we are done with this, we should be able to exit this connection automatically. Now, let's see if this connection exists or not to begin with. I'm just going to print the connection. Let's see what happens here. So you get to see a connector object is created at some particular address. So that means there is an object that is created. It's not none. Since it's not none, that means we have been or we are able to connect to our SQL system. Now, the first thing I want to do is in MySQL connector, I want to know how many databases are there, and I want to, let's say, list databases that exist in my case. Just want to know how many databases are there, and I just want to list them to begin with. So let's start that to begin with, and let's see how we can do that. Now, first, when we start to work on, let's say, a SQL connection, let's remember this particular connection object that we have created. Currently, it has connected to our SQL server. From here, the next thing we need to do is establish connection to databases. Let's see how we can get to know if we have databases, if we can connect to them, and so on. Let's start with this. With this particular connection that we have, instead of this try and this except block, I'm going to modify this slightly so that we connect and then we disconnect. Let's change that. If I don't use with, that means I need to connect and I need to disconnect. So I'm going to have a finally block. Within this finally block, I'm going to perform connection dot close. And this connection, I'm going to create connection equals this particular connection. So let's start with this now. I'm just skipping with block so we get to do multiple things upon connection, right? And let's start with this. Let's take this up. So once we have this SQL connection created, the next thing is for us to know whether this SQL connection works or not. We are able to know that just by printing that connection, it has created an object. That is fairly fine and simple. Now, the next thing we need to do is create a cursor for this connection. Let's look at what that means in our case. So the whole idea here is that the moment you connect and the moment you start this connection, you need a cursor, which is a control structure, which is basically an object that is created using connection so that you can perform operations. You can fetch, you can read, you can do a lot of different things through database. So we need a cursor first to begin with. So let's create that. To create a cursor, very simple task. You just need to use connection dot cursor. That's it. This will create a MySQL cursor that connects. And essentially what this does is it helps provide output from databases once you connect with them. That's the whole purpose of it. So let's create an object. Let's call it cursor and save it. Once this is done, you can execute any query with a cursor in short. I'll just show you. I'll just write cursor dot execute of show databases. We know this is a query that this is a command that we use generally. So let's just try this out. Oh, yeah, I've just executed it. And you see there is no error, no exception occurred. We created a cursor and the cursor is able to execute this particular query called show databases. However, we haven't gotten any database. We haven't seed any database. That's because all the databases that are fetched, all the list of databases that are retrieved within this cursor object. From this cursor object, we then have to fetch these things separately. So just take a look at this. If I print cursor, for instance, remember it's an object that is available and it says this is the query that is supposed to be executed by this object. Now, here's what I'm going to do. After executing, whatever response comes, if you want to get all the responses, you have these: fetch all, fetch many, fetch one. So we have already executed, please remember this, we have already executed a query. After executing the query, we just need to fetch the result. To fetch the result, we'll just use fetch all. This will particularly fetch all the results that's going to come up there. So once you go through it, you'll get to see these are the default databases that are available once you start working through this. So a simple scenario, a simple example that helps us just connect to a database and perform this. That's all we're doing. So I hope this sounds simple and makes sense. So any query within this, please let me know. So a very simple thing to do in when it comes down to this, fairly simple operation that we can do. So any query within this, please take a minute if required, and yeah, let me know if any queries. I will answer the same. If no queries, we can move ahead to the next part of our task. This is only to show and list all the databases that we have right now. We will have a lot of other operations to do. Again, given that all of us are fairly aware of this, there's not much you need to do other than these basic operations where you can basically take a query, perform execution, and get the responses. However, the complicated things are in other databases, to be honest, because you need to write wrapper functions for a lot of other databases. But thankfully for SQL, you have direct functionality like this. Moving on, here's what we're going to do up next. Let's start with the next task. Again, just a query. If there's any questions still here, please feel free to let me know. A very simple operation, a very simple way to do this should really not be difficult for us to work around. And yeah, we can start looking at um, the next steps right after this. Right, so no queries ahead, which means we can move ahead to the next step. So the next step we're going to do is anyway, we have this particular uh, Pokemon data. We're going to read this. And after reading this Pokemon data, I'm just going to store it as one, let's say, table in our database. Let's do that. Let's remember we have this Pokemon data as an Excel file. We have all of these. I just want to create a database from this. Let's try to see how we can do this. Now, for us to do this, the first step is to read the data set. And we know how to do that. We have Pandas, and we can use that to just use data frame equals pd dot read Excel. Oh, to read Excel, I also need open.py Excel because Pandas depends on these things for reference. And we're just going to start reading a couple of things. Let's do that. I'm just going to read Pokemon data.xlsx and let's run this. it should be able to read this data frame, read this as a data frame because we're in the same directory. There we go. There are no errors that occurred, which means it is able to read this data frame, read this as a data frame, sorry. Now that we have read this as a data frame, let's go to the next step. The next step is for us to walk through this entire data frame and insert these within, let's say, the database that we're just going to create. So let's start working on this. For I'm going to go through each iterator. We're going to go through each and every single iterator of this particular database. And when we go through each and every or of this data frame, when we go through each and every row of this data frame, you can try to insert them. So let's start with this. There's a function called iter rows. Iter rows is a function that will go through each row of your data frame. So I'm just going to go through each row. And in each row, you're going to get two things, the index and the row value. These are the two things we get always. Iter rows is going to return a tuple of two values, the index and the value of the row. Once we do this, we just need to insert it into a database. So let's go ahead and create an insert query so that we can insert it ahead. So the insert query will be something like this. As we already know, insert into, let's say, Pokemon. Let's assume that is the table name. And we have to specify the following data. That is which column and which, let's say, um, rows we're going to use. And that's exactly what we're going to try to do. So yeah, this is just a basic thing we've started with. Again, just as a precursor, if any queries still here, please feel free to let me know. Right, so no specific queries, then that's pretty awesome. So let's go ahead and insert it. Now, in order to insert into this particular table, we need two things. One is what columns are we going to insert and what values are we going to insert within it. So let's start with that. So we're going to insert into our table name the following hash and name we have, and then let's say type 1, and let's insert HP. This should be enough. Now, please note here, this whole string is in double quotes. So this inner string that I'm going to create should not be in double quotes. It should be in something other than double quotes. That's the reason why I'm using single quotations for this. If you use double quotes here, it's going to break this previous string indicating till here is a string, and the rest of it is just a comment. We don't want that to happen. Hence, we do this. So we're inserting these four values. Inserting these four um, columns specifically, and the values for it will be just, let's just add percentage %s, percentage %s, percentage %s, comma percentage %s. We're just specifying that there will be four values that we're going to insert for these places. And the values that we're going to use are going to be the four values of this particular row. That is, it's going to be row of hash, row of name, row of type 1, and then row of HP. This is exactly what we want to work on. Now, moving ahead with this, let's go on to the next part of this. Once we do this, we just have to execute this query. This is the whole query, the insert query and the values we need to insert. This combination of insert query and the values we need to insert, we just need to execute it by specifying cursor.execute of insert query and values. That's it. Once you do it, you need to then save the data just like how we do it in SQL. There is connection dot commit. You just execute that function to make sure that it commits. Now, one thing that we need to know, in case of any error in any line, you can just go ahead and do connection dot rollback to make sure that your entire data is having its own sanity with the ACID compliance that we talk about and everything with the SQL databases. So yeah, that's that. And whenever you're closing the connection, it's a good habit to also close the cursor along with it. So I'm just going to go ahead here and use cursor dot close as well. So here's what we have done. We have started a connection, localhost, with this username and password, and we have created a cursor out of it that can execute commands and retrieve the response of these commands. Once we execute commands and retrieve the response for these commands, we then go ahead and read our Excel file as a data frame. We then go through each row of it. We insert the following four values into the following four columns. That is uh, number, name, type one, and health points. And the values we're going to insert are going to be of that particular row from that data frame. We're going to perform insert query with these particular values where each percentage %s will be replaced by the appropriate value and it'll be inserted. Once this is inserted, we'll repeat this for the rest of this logic, and then we just close or commit and close it. You can also put this insert query outside because since it is common and constant, you don't have to redo this each time. So it really doesn't matter where you put it up. But for efficiency's sake, it's better if you put it up outside because it has no relevance uh, inside a for loop. You don't have to literally create it again and again and again, creating extra or taking up slightly extra amount of time. But anyway, let's do that and let's see how it works. Let's run this. So it says exception occurred, data frame has, oh, I am sorry. It's supposed to be iter rows, not iter with extra R. Right now, let's see, check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL server version for right syntax to use near, let's see where this has gone wrong. Hash name and for this values at line 1. All right, let's see where this has gone wrong. Apparently, it's unable to store the first entry itself for a particular reason. Just walking through this to realize why that is the case in the SQL syntax. Oh, yeah. All right. Let's basically start with this. So the thing here is I forgot about this. Um, we don't have a table called Pokemon to begin with. So please bear with that. We don't have a Pokemon to begin with. Sorry, table to begin with called Pokemon. So the first thing we need to do is create this table first up. So once we create this table, we can then go ahead and perform all sort of insert queries. So the whole idea is that um, when we start working on this, it can only, let's say, create a table and then uh, insert. Now, let's move ahead. Prior to that, if there are any queries in this, again, please let me know because we're not going to go way in depth in this. We're just going to learn best practices followed by this because execute operations are very simple. You add the query and you run execute and you commit it. Those executions are done. This you already know. This is for insert, update, delete. For search, you really don't. For find, you really don't have to do that. So yeah, any queries particularly till here, please feel free to let me know. If there are no queries, we can move ahead over to the next part of this and let's create the table prior to this. So to create the table, I'm just gonna add create table SQL query equals, let's add a string. You can add a multi-line string, which will help us look at and understand this in a better way. That's the whole purpose of it. So let's perform create table. Let's create Pokemon and let's add this. So the first thing is hash, which is an int. Then we have name, which is again, I'll tell you why I totally forgot about creating the table before we start with this, because there's another database I was thinking of when I started explaining this, and I wanted to explain how Python is something that is well suited to certain other kind of databases as well. So I wanted to explain that ahead of this, and I think I got confused between them. So please bear with that. So let's take this back here. Let's take some large amount of characters for our reference. Let's take type 1, and let's take HP, which is going to be an int as well. Now, once we have done this, we just have to execute this. So let's try cursor.execute of create table SQL query and connection.commit. Done. So this will create the table, and then we can move ahead to the next part. Let's see if this works out as expected. Okay, again, apparently I am facing some issue in performing these operations for some reason. Though I am connected to this properly, um, I I probably need to compare with the SQL Server version with this. I'll just check with that. But this should be working as expected, unfortunately. So I'll just check this out probably in a while. I don't want to take up too much time on this, so I'll try this out ahead in time if I'm unable to resolve this within the next minute or two, so that I can do this within the break time and then go ahead with this. So I'm just going to try one or two things now. In case it doesn't work within the next one or two tries that I want to work around, I'll take this up ahead further in time. So um, hold on, let me just try to make some changes. Let me change this to backticks. Let's see if that works. So this might be one of the reason why it's not working. So I just want to try this out. No, apparently this is not the reason because it's easier to use backtick as an escape character for such specific characters like hash when it comes down to SQL Server, because we don't expect that to be, let's say, the name of a column generally, right? So we need to escape it for other identifiers. So yeah, either than this, I'll just try to replace this with num, for instance, hoping this might resolve this. Again, if it doesn't resolve with this, I'll just verify this through by spending some time ahead and walking through this, so that I will be able to store this appropriately. Because one thing we are able to see is we are able to connect ahead, we are able to get the list of databases we have. That means connection is not a problem at all. We have no issue connecting to a database. However, oh, somehow I totally forgot about this. Yeah, somehow I totally forgot about this. The brackets. There we go. There we go. Right. Yeah, somehow I had forgotten completely about this. So yeah, so please bear with that. So one minor error, I totally forgot about this particular scenario. And that should pretty much help around to begin with. Now, let's go back to this. Um, Not sure if there was a message that I had gotten in between, but it's fine if you would like to specify something or let me know something. We can work around that appropriately. But yeah, let's go back ahead to this case now. Now, in this case, when I run this code again, oh yeah, we need to first select again some default things. That is, we need to first select whatever database we want, and within that database, we need to then create the table and work around. Again, I am terribly sorry for this. How do I say it? Very basic points that have just gone away. So I'm just